Hi. Have you started writing a fiction novel, perhaps? Or maybe you have an idea for a fiction novel. I've talked to a few people in the last few days about their fiction novels, and they maybe have little bits and pieces written, or they're not really sure how to put it together or how to flow things. One of the best experiences of my life was being able to work with two fantastic editors and fiction authors, Julie Ballon and Carrie Blair. And in the process of working with these two fantastic editors over a couple years, I learned some really good techniques for making your fiction come alive. And one of the techniques is to do your descriptions on the. Now, let me explain what that means. When you write a book, maybe you're reading a book. You're reading a book and you kind of bog down and you're able to set that book aside. Then there are certain rules that author probably has broken to make you lose interest. And one of them is stopping to go into a lengthy description. I remember reading Dean Koontz's Lightning, which is one of my all-time favorite novels. This really is one of my all-time favorites. But there was a point where I bogged down, and it was in the middle of a chase scene, and he stops and he spends like a page describing the ficus that the hero is running past, describes the yard, and it just bogs down. Now, even the best, even Dean Koontz can make errors in the way that they structure the book. And that's an example of it. Even the best authors do this. So anytime you notice that you're bogging down in a book when you're reading it, maybe that the author is not doing their descriptions on the run. So what I thought I would do today is kind of a fun little thing that's different than what I normally do. And I want to read to you from my novel, An Uncertain Justice. Now, I had some help from both Julie Ballon and Carrie Blair on this book. Julie helped me with the prologue of it, and Carrie Blair was the main editor for it. And I think that this book is probably one of the best. It is the best one I've ever personally done because I think it had Carrie's expertise on it. But I had learned how to do these descriptions on the run from Julie. So here we go. This is a scene from a book that I wrote about my second great-grandfather and my grandfather. My second great-grandfather was gunned down. He was a deputy sheriff on Lookout Mountain, and he was gunned down by two boys who were running moonshine. He had busted their still, and they thought he had showed up to arrest them, and they instigated a fight, and he ends up getting murdered. And my grandfather, whose name is Sherman, is very upset about the death of his grandfather. And this is a story, but this is a little snippet of him with the girl that he is falling in love with. And it's after the trial has taken place, and he's been away from her for a while, and he's giving her a recap. Now, these two characters, Sherman and Edna, my grandfather and grandmother, come from very different worlds. They have very different ways they live their lives. There's a little bit of a saints and sinners theme throughout this. And so this is one of my favorite interactions between Sherman and Edna and the book. And I thought I would share this with you, and I want you to listen for the descriptions on the run. Now, I will try to point out a few of them, but I don't want to, take away or detract from the reading by, stopping on every one. But I'll point out a few of them. Okay, so here it goes. It seemed like forever before they were alone. Thada and Dot, who are Edna's little sisters, begged relentlessly for more target shooting. Was it possible for a 10-year-old to flirt? Edna despised the foolish sense of jealousy that needled her heart. How did the trial go? She asked as they walked hand in hand toward the creek. The evening sky was a blaze of red and purple. Okay, so there you go. She asked how the trial went, and then you have a little bit of a description. They're walking hand in hand. The sky is a blaze of red. Okay, so we're not stopping for long description, but just enough of description on the run. Went well. They convicted them both, sentenced them to hang next April. Does that make you feel better? She studied his somber expression. So now we've got a little bit of description of Sherman coming in here, but it's right after a little bit of a dialogue with her. It does, but I'll feel even better when they're cold in their graves. His voice was hard and chilled, and his chin stiffened like granite. So again, we have a description of Sherman here, just a little bit mixed in with the dialogue. Edna looked away from him, letting a few seconds pass before she asked her next question. Did your aunt have to testify? She did. She was scared to death, but she held herself together. Her testimony led to the conviction for both Ralph and George. Sherman strolled a few more steps. That's good. Edna flicked a mosquito from her skirt. Again, just a tiny bit of description, so it keeps us in the moment with the characters instead of just constant dialogue. You get a little bit of description, so you're still with them and been visualizing. How are you feeling about things now? Any better at all? She asked, hoping he'd gain some kind of peace from the trial. He stopped the walking and turned to her. It just feels like a waste, like Grandpa died for nothing. And now those two boys will die for nothing, she remarked. His face flushed crimson, and he growled, "Oh, it won't be for nothing. They deserve to die, today, not a year from now. Grandpa didn't get another breath, so why should they?" His sudden irritation unsettled Edna, and she fumbled for her words to diffuse his reaction. "I didn't mean they didn't deserve their punishment." She put her hand to his chest, trying to calm him down. Again, we've got a little bit of description there. "I only meant their irrational act ruined their lives, and a lot of other people's too. It's all a waste of human life." He made no reply, just turned and started walking again. Edna accompanied him, noting the red blotches that gradually started to fade from Sherman's face. So again, we get a little bit of description. He's blotchy and it's starting to go away. He's starting to calm down a little bit. And notice we're showing. We're not saying Sherman calm down. It's the description. It's how Edna sees him, and she's deducing that he's calming down by the description. It's all from her point of view here. We don't know what Sherman's thinking. We only deduce what he's thinking through Edna's eyes. That, again, is a point of view, which comes in. It's an important aspect, and I'll talk about that in another video. After a few minutes, he reached for her hand again. "I'm sorry. I'm just still upset about it all, I guess." "I understand." Edna gave his hand a little squeeze. They strolled in silence for a while until Edna decided to change the subject. "Sorry the girls trapped you outside when you got here. You should have come on in the house. Don't feel like you have to entertain them. They said you were playing cards. I didn't want to disturb you." He stiffened and his cheeks grew red again. What had she done to irritate him now? You wouldn't have been disturbing me," she assured him. "You could have joined us, or I could have." "I don't play cards," he interjected, before she could finish her sentence. His jaw tightened and the dimple in his chin disappeared. So again, we got a little bit of, we're showing his emotions in this. We're seeing, we also know he has a dimple in his chin now, okay? All right, so we have a little bit of description of Sherman there. "You don't play cards? You mean like you don't dance?" She stood still. He released her hand and turned to face her. "You don't have to be embarrassed. I can teach you how to dance, and I don't want you to teach me," he blurted, then took a deep breath and exhaled. "I mean, even if I knew, I wouldn't do it." Sherman looked toward the sunset and then back at her. He lowered his voice. "It's sinful." "Sinful? Dancing?" Edna's eyebrows narrowed. She'd never heard such a thing. Or was he talking about the cards? "We don't gamble for money, if that's what you're thinking." He shook his head. "It's still wrong. Card playing, dancing, and especially drinking." Edna's jaw slackened and her heart thumped. No wonder he'd acted the way he had with her family. Her mind darted back to the evening at the creek with the gypsies and how he'd been so withdrawn. Then realization dawned. This was more than about her family. It was about her. "So you're saying I'm sinful?" She pressed her palm to her chest. "No," he shook his head. "I didn't say that." "Don't go backpedaling now, Mr. Morton. You just said playing cards and dancing is sinful. I play cards and dance, so that makes me sinful." Sherman looked down at his hands and twirled a blade of grass between his thumb and forefinger. Again, you give him a little bit of action, showing what he's doing. He's nervous. He's fumbling through this. And you're seeing it through Edna's eyes again. "I wasn't saying anything about you. I'm saying I can't do those things. I won't do them. I know better, so I have to do what I know." He wouldn't look her in the eyes. Edna felt indignation swelling in her like the creek rising after a summer thunderstorm. It throbbed in her temples and thundered upon the walls of her chest. So, I'm a dumb old girl who don't know no better than to sin. She hoped he realized she never used incorrect grammar, and her use of it now would illustrate her point. How self-righteous could he be? She was a good person. She'd been a good girl her whole life. Studied hard, behaved herself, prayed, read her Bible, and here he stood saying she was sinful for dancing and playing cards. You're the smartest person I know, Edna. You know I didn't mean that. His blue eyes pled with hers. How old are you, Sherman? She blurted. He swallowed and his jaw flinched. 18. His nervous gaze darted to one side and back at her. I'll be 18 in October. Edna swallowed hard. Her eyelids closed momentarily, and she continued, well, while we're clearing the air, I'm 23. His eyes widened and she nodded. Yeah, 23. She paused. Is that a sin, Sherman? Are your parents going to tell you it's a sin for you to see a woman of 23? Her breathing grew ragged from the tears threatening beneath the surface. Because if that's a sin, I want to know now so I can avoid further humiliation. No, he shook his head. It's not a sin. She waited for him to say something further. He didn't. They aren't going to like it, are they? She deduced from the look on his silent face. No, he shrugged. Probably not. So where does that leave us? My family and I are sinners, and you and your family are evidently ready for sainthood. She tossed her hand in the air as if he might flutter off toward the heavens at any moment. He winced, but she wasn't finished yet. I'm practically an old maid, and you're not even 18. She hated herself for the blunt cruelty of her words. They were crueler to her than to him, but Edna felt compelled to say what she knew would drive Sherman away. She genuinely cared for him, but she'd rather rip these feelings from her heart now than have it be worse later. Tears trickled down her cheeks when he didn't reply. Several moments passed before he muttered, we're not saints, but we come from different worlds. She said, we could make it work. His eyes met hers, but he didn't look convinced. When you really believe that, you let me know. She swiped the tears from her cheek, turned on her heel, and strode back to the house. So there's your example of those descriptions on the run. You integrate them in with the dialogue. Don't stop and do massive descriptions. Keep it interwoven, keep the action moving, and give enough description when you're doing a lot of dialogue to keep the reader in the moment with the characters where they're still visualizing what they're doing. So anyway, I hope that gives you some ideas. I'm doing a writer retreat in southern Utah in September. I hope you'll join me for that. Or if you want a free consult, I do a 20-minute strategy session to talk with you about your book, whether you're doing fiction, nonfiction, whether you're ready to market it, or you're back in the writing or the publishing phases. Stop by idealmarketers.com, and there's a link at the top where you can get a free strategy session. So let's talk about it. Y'all take care. I'll see y'all tomorrow with another tip. Bye-bye.